In this sixth session of week 3, we are talking about the decline of traditional Korean alcoholic beverages during colonial period. Before we talk about this colonial period, we should mention that when Westerners visited Korea in the end of 19th century and then early 20th century, there was one complaint that they shared. And that was, in Korea, when you meet people, because Koreans don't drink tea, there was a not really proper drink other than alcohol when you meet people. And this was recorded by Isabella Bird Bishop, the British lady who traveled Korea, Japan, China in late 19th and early 20th century. She mentioned when she came to Korea, even when she visited the palace to meet the queen, Minbi, and she felt that there was not proper drinks, especially for women and children, because mostly Koreans, the only drink available for Koreans was alcohol. And if you don't drink alcohol, especially during daytime, then there's not much thing to drink. So we can imagine that in late Joseon dynasty, alcohol was probably the only popular drink when people meet. Of course, there were other amazingly good Korean drinks such as shikke and other things, traditional one, but they were confined only to high-level Yangban and wealthy Yangban class. And ordinary people didn't really have much thing to drink other than alcohol. And colonial government, or actually any government today, government wants to control alcohol for good reasons. First of all, alcohol is a kind of drug, and government should be careful in controlling alcohol. People, if they drink too much, and now that damages the productivity and general health of people. So, colonial government in Korea, they started to control alcoholic drinks for another purpose as well, the taxation, to collect tax. Many governments tend to control the alcoholic consumption and production, and the Japanese colonial government was not exception. So they started to control. So now only small number of permitted companies could produce alcohol, and alcohol making at home privately was prohibited. And that's why many the soju, particularly soju making practices in many wealthy families, they tend to decline, and Koreans permanently lost that tradition. And of course, it's not permanent because recently they are reviving. But during colonial period, this was a big loss. The summary of this week's lecture is that during colonial period, normally any colonial rules are generally for economic exploitation of the colonized people and also political domination. And they also brings cultural penetration and exchanges as well. So in this period, in terms of culinary cultures, there were quite a bit of culinary exchanges, and exchanges happened between Korea and Japan, and Korea and China, and Korea and in terms of Western food, all brought by Japanese or Chinese from Japan. And that was possible because there was a lot of migration of people in this period. A lot of Japanese, way over 500,000 Japanese were living in Korea. Now that doesn't include the soldiers they are civilians. And also, some Chinese were following Japanese to Korea from Chinatowns in Nagasaki and Yokohama. And they brought new food. And Koreans also went to Japan as a student, but also workers. And they also learned Japanese food in Japan. And by the time when they returned to Korea, the Korean culinary culture would change for sure. And particularly the Chinese people who came from Japan, they already had a good experience in selling and marketizing Chinese food to Japanese. So it was not that difficult for them to localize the Chinese food to make it suitable to Korean consumers. And that's how jjajangmyeon and jjapong and gummandu and tangsuyuk and japchae especially, these Chinese food became an essential part of Korean food and food culture today. And in the context of food, the Japanese colonial rule of Korea brought new technologies and methods of producing and processing food. And it also brought many new food items and cooking methods, which made Korean culinary culture richer. And also Japanese also learned the Korean practices, and the example include mentaiko. Thank you very much.